Hey everybody, when I talk about planting up containers, I spend loads of time talking about annuals. And so those are the petunias and the begonias and the verbena and all those plants that give us a great flower show all season long. And then when the cold weather hits, they die and they are done forever. Well, you don't have to just stick to annuals. You can also consider perennials. There's tons of great perennial plants that look good in containers, and that means you can enjoy them year after year. Some of them you can enjoy in that same container for a couple years. Other ones you can enjoy for the season, then you can plant them out into your yard. Either way, you really get kind of more bang for your buck because these perennials are going to be around for a really long time, many years versus just one season. So that's a really big advantage. Second advantage is for most of these containers, in fact all of the containers, they use a lot less water than our annual plants. Our annuals are kind of water hogs, they're fertilizer hogs. Meanwhile, the perennials, they don't need as much water and they don't need barely any fertilizer at all. So we kind of maybe gave them fertilizer midway through the season and that was it. And some of them we didn't give any to. So that's a real big advantage too, especially if you say have like a second home or you're just not great about watering. These are way more forgiving because they just don't need as much water. And the shade ones, I think we watered those, it was less than once a week. It was probably every 10 days. I think some of them, in fact, I think Stacy was saying there were most of these baskets, these three in front, I think they watered them maybe 4 times through the summer. It was really like 2 weeks or more. They were in the shade, so they just didn't need that much water. So that's really incredible when you compare that to our annual baskets, which we're watering sometimes twice a day. So big difference in that. Now I'm going to show you some of the plants that we planted up this year that did really well. And then there's a couple plants that I'll show you that also you should consider because it's just a really nice way to go. One thing to consider though is that perennials a lot of times don't have that really long bloom time. So when we planted these up, our thinking was we'd have different plants blooming at different times. So I'm going to show you some of those plants and give you a closer look at what we did plant up. I'll start with these baskets in the front. So this one here is a full sun basket, and in the center here we have a type of alyssum and it's called Golden Spring, and it's kind of unusual to see a perennial alyssum. This one gets a beautiful yellow flower that just kind of sticks around from early summer for weeks and weeks and weeks. It just keeps blooming and reblooming. It is now done, but we're left with this beautiful kind of silver carpet of foliage. It's really quite nice. It kind of trails a little bit as well. So nice shape to it, keeps really nice when it's in the basket like this. And then we planted that with some ajuga. Ajuga can be nice. There's a couple different kinds, so there can be like thinner leafed ones. This one has a nice kind of almost chocolate color to the leaf. Gets a blue flower as well, so those always look really nice when they're blooming, but even when they're not, the foliage is quite nice. Then right here, this one here we can put in quite a bit of shade. In fact, we've been having it in almost full shade. It's been doing fantastic. This is sweet woodruff. And you gotta love how this one is. The new foliage is a little bit brighter green, and then the more mature foliage is a really nice, dark, rich green. Planted that with a heuchera, also known as a coral bell, and get a nice kind of caramel color on the leaf on this one. This did have flowers that came up. They're more of an ivory, kind of creamy color, and the flowers last forever. The hummingbirds love it. This one needed so little water, it was just unbelievable. This one over here has some more of that ajuga, but there's also a type of phlox in here. Now you might know of creeping phlox and garden phlox. This one's a little bit different. It's Phlox stolonifera. The variety is called Sherwood Forest, or Sherwood Purple, I'm sorry. And it has a nice kind of purpley flower that was on it before, but even when it's done, it has a nice trailing habit. Then back here, these are sun containers, and in the center is some echinacea. And echinacea is fantastic for pots just because it likes the sun and they keep blooming for a really long time. Their bloom time is extremely long, and this particular variety, I've got to try to remember how to say the name because they changed it. It used to be called Lakota Fire, but now it's called Summer Song Firefinch. And so it gets a really nice kind of salmony pink color that kind of gradually turns to more of an orange kind of color, so it kind of fades to different colors. I can't remember what order the colors are, or maybe it starts orange and goes pink. I can't remember which direction, so I don't know which ones are coming and going on this, but it looks really great. It gets lots of flowers. And then this trailing plant here is a perennial geranium, and it was covered in lots of these purple flowers. But even when it's not, the foliage is really quite nice on it. Has some daylilies in here as well. So the daylilies, those just kind of keep sending up new blooms. It has that's a yellow one. I think it's like one of the returns, happy returns or something like that. We did have a lily in here. That was just for some spring color. And there was a yellow primrose as well. And we might see another bloom off of that now that it's a little bit cooler. And then this one here, more echinacea. This is the powwow wild berry. This is some tick seed or coreopsis. And let's see, the variety, is it Jethro Tull? No, it is called Golden Sphere. So really nice flower on it. We haven't really been deadheading it. The flowers just kind of dry up. They still look kind of nice even when they're done from a distance, and then they fall off over time. So really nice one for that. This one also had a lily and a primrose, and this primrose did decide to bounce back. I'm not sure how this one's showing up on camera, but it is one of my favorites. We've got this really beautiful dark heuchera in here, or corabelle. It's Primo Black Pearl, has these really intense, dark, glossy leaves. And then we have that right alongside a hosta, and the hosta is called Dancing Darling. That'll get white flowers. And then this kind of bicolor speckled leaf. This one is a Pulmonaria. I think it's called Pinkablue, and in the springtime that gets a really cool pink and blue flower. The flower changes color over time. I don't know if the camera's really catching how nice this one is, but it's just this fantastic mound of kind of different colors and textures and patterns. It's absolutely beautiful. Here's one that I think we overplanted. So we had a daisy in here, or leucanthemum, had beautiful white flowers, and those have kind of finished up. And then there was also a salvia in here, a perennial salvia that had purple flowers. They looked pretty good for a little while, but then they got really big really quick. And I think they're competing a little too much. And we have that with some lamb's ear, or I think it's called stachi or sachi. And that's a really beautiful one because it has these really soft leaves. They're wet right now, so you don't get to see how silvery they are normally, but really beautiful. I would definitely use the lamb's ear again. I'd be a little more careful maybe with those daisies and the salvias because they seem to be a little more temperamental than what we saw with the lamb's ear. Take a look at this one. This trailing plant is a creeping Jenny, and it just kind of just keeps going and going. And we have that with another heuchera. This one's called Pumpkin Spice, so it gets the nice kind of orangey color with it. The leaves kind of change color. The newer leaves are brighter, and then the more mature leaves get a little bit darker. And one thing people don't always realize is that the creeping Jenny is perennial in our area. It can be a little sensitive, but you can actually cut any of these pieces off. And as long as these areas here are touching the soil, they usually take root. Now, I don't know how well they do if you did them right now. They probably would do just fine. But I know when we do them in the spring and summer, as long as the soil is moist, they just kind of keep taking off. And you can see the creeping Jenny comes out more of a golden color. And then a lot of times it will get a little darker as it matures. Here's another one I really like. It includes some of this Brunnera. I think this is the Jack Frost variety. It has this beautiful silver and green leaf. Deer don't like this one. Here's another hosta. Here's, I think it's that same heuchera, the Primo Black Pearl. And we also included some of the Paris heuchera or corabelle, and it has this beautiful leaf on it. I mean, I really love how that one looks. And the Paris is a great reblooming variety. So we get these pink blooms throughout the summer off of the Paris. So this is a good shade planter. The Paris can take a good amount of sun, but the other plants in here generally prefer a little bit more shade. Another one over here. Here's another Brunnera. I think this is the Jack of Diamonds. You can see much bigger leaf on this one. That's the drinking gourd hosta. And then this hosta is called Curly Fries. Curly Fries isn't growing quite as much as we like to see, but I love the leaf on Curly Fries. It just has that kind of wobbly look to it. Another hosta here, another Pulmonaria. I think this one is, let's see, I think I have the tag right here. It is called Raspberry Splash. It has that beautiful kind of splotching leaf on there, and then it does get kind of a pink and blue flower as well. So beautiful, beautiful plants here. Now, I've mentioned heucheras, but there's also heucherellas, and heucherellas are known for having this trailing habit. So they're a cross between a tiarella and a heuchera. So they're just really nice plants as far as that goes, but you do get more of the trailing action, so that can be nice. And they do come in those really wide range of colors. So, you can get the reds, you can get kind of, that's more of a purple and silver. You get the limes. This one has a nice peach effect to it. So that's also another option if you're thinking heucheras, but if you want trailing, this is a good way to go. Lamium, also known as dead nettle, that really does a great job in hanging baskets as well because it has this really great trailing habit, and it just looks good all season long. This one's kind of got more of a silver leaf, and this one is more lime, and they tend to have either pink or white or purple flowers on them, so they'll get a little bit of a bloom as well. I think, oh, here we have some right here. So that's what the flowers look like on them. Really nice one to add, especially for shadier spots. You can also try polonium or Jacob's ladder. This particular variety is variegated like this, so it really stands out. It's called Stairway to Heaven, and I just like the habit on it. It's going to fill those pots really nice, so that's another good addition. At the end of the season, you have a couple of options. So you could dismantle these pots and then take the individual plants and put them in different places in your yard. Just make sure that you're putting, the sunny plants in the sunny spots and the shady ones in the shady spots. And usually they'll do pretty well. Now, a lot of times people will say like, oh, only do it when they're dormant, or do it before they're dormant, or do it in the spring. There's a lot of rules. We've done it at all different times and we've had pretty good success. So I don't really get too worried about that. And if I lose one, I lose one. That's kind of my mentality. You can kind of investigate what they recommend for each one of these different varieties. But same thing with dividing them. A lot of these are getting really full. Like this ajuga really is probably going to have to be divided. It's just going to take over that pot. So when you normally divide ajuga, I actually don't know because we usually just do it in the middle of the summer, divide them up and transplant them. But I have a feeling this would be one of those that we could. If you're not sure and you're dividing, what I tend to do is kind of divide it so that you're only taking small bits off and still leave kind of the main area. That way, at least you won't lose the main one. So if you're doing it at the wrong time, if you sacrifice those small ones, you won't worry too much about it. That's just my philosophy. I'm not giving you probably really sound advice. Somebody else probably can give you better advice, but we've had really good luck. So I guess maybe it's based on experience. So we haven't had a lot of trouble with these not coming back or when we've dismantled them. So that works too. Now, if you keep them in their pots, you do need to make sure that you're protecting the roots. We're not really worried about what's happening above. We want to make sure that they are getting some moisture because we don't want the soil to dry out. So any natural rain, any natural snow is fine. So a lot of times people will put them like up against their house because that'll protect them a little. We just have to watch that they're not in the drip line of your roof because that can be tons of water and snow coming down on them and that could kind of drown them. We also want to make sure that the drainage holes don't get plugged. So sometimes if you're putting them like on, in a clay spot or something like that, those drainage holes can get plugged and then these plants are just sitting in a big bucket of water all winter. You don't want that either. So you want them to drain, but you don't want them to dry out. So a lot of times people also put them like in their shed or in a barn or something like that. Now, if you're doing that and you wait until they're completely dormant before you do that, if you do that, then you need to make sure that they don't dry out. So depending on where you live, where we are, we don't really have to do much supplemental watering in the winter. We check them maybe once a month. Other places, I think people are checking them, every other week or even more often. If you have them indoors, you do need to double check because you don't want them to dry out. That water serves as an insulator, also protects the roots. If the roots dry out, the plant can definitely die. So there is always some risk if you're going to keep a plant in a container, but you can kind of minimize that by making sure it's moist, making sure it's protected. You can also put stuff around the pot. So you can cluster pots around each other. So you can even take your annual pots and put those around it because you don't care about those annual pots, what temperature they get, and they'll help insulate. Other people will put straw or leaves around it. You can also get your soil bags if you have bags of soil left over or you buy them in advance for next year because they were on sale at the end of the season. You can pack those up around these containers and that will insulate all your pots as well and kind of keep those roots protected from the cold. So hopefully this gives you some inspiration. Again, if you have like a second home that you don't get to every day or every couple days during the summer, or if you're just a really bad waterer, perennials can be really the way to go because they really don't need that water. They don't need that regular fertilizer. I absolutely do not recommend you fertilize these the same way you would fertilize like petunias and all the other annuals. Perennials, they really don't need it. We usually give them their fertilizer in the spring, and then maybe we'll give them another dose like in July or something like that. And we just use a time release kind of Osmocote, kind of throw it in there, and that's all we do with them. So hope that gives you some ideas. I'll talk to you guys all very, very soon.